Hey there, and welcome back to the English Talk community. I'm so glad you're here with me today, and let me just say this. If you've ever felt frustrated trying to understand native English speakers when they talk fast, you're definitely not alone. This is something so many people face, even after years of studying English. And today we're going to talk about it in a way that feels real, honest, and most importantly, useful. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever watched a movie or a TV series in English and thought, wait, did they just skip half the sentence? Or maybe you were in a conversation with a native speaker, nodding and smiling while secretly thinking, I didn't understand anything they just said. If that's ever happened to you, I want you to know, you're not the only one. And more than that, it's not your fault. English spoken by native speakers can feel like an entirely different language. They connect words, cut syllables, use slang, and speak in a rhythm that isn't taught in most traditional classrooms. I've worked with learners from so many different parts of the world: Paris, Istanbul, Manila, Cape Town, Seoul, Lagos, Warsaw, and many other places. And no matter the country or background, this is one of the most common problems people share with me. I can read, I can write, I even passed English tests, but when someone speaks fast, I freeze. I lose the sentence. I only catch a few words. And I get it. It's frustrating. You might feel like your English isn't enough, like you missed something essential, or worse, you start to doubt yourself. But I want you to stop for a second and really hear me now. The problem is not you. The problem is the method. You've been trained to understand English slowly, word by word, like a school test. But real-world English doesn't work that way. It's about flow, tone, and listening for meaning, not for every single word. And the good news is, you can learn this. You can absolutely train your ear to understand fast English without memorizing more grammar rules or stressing over every detail. You just need the right tools, the right approach, and yes, a bit of patience with yourself. So if you've ever sat in a Zoom meeting with native speakers and felt lost, if you've avoided conversations because you're afraid you won't understand, or if you've hit rewind on a YouTube video over and over again because the words just flew by, you're in the right place. This episode is especially for you. We're going to dive into practical things you can do, things that real learners around the world are doing right now to go from, I can't follow native English to, hey, I actually understood that. We're not going to focus on being perfect. Forget that. This is about being confident, being real, and making progress that you can feel in your daily life. Here's the thing. When you understand fast English, everything changes. Conversations become less scary. Watching a movie becomes fun again. You stop translating in your head and start thinking in English. That's not just about language skills. It's about freedom. It's about connection. And I want that for you. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine being in a conversation with a native speaker, someone from New York or Sydney, maybe London, and they're speaking just like they always do. Fast, casual, natural. But this time, you're following. You don't need subtitles. You don't panic. You're calm. You get the jokes. You respond naturally. That moment is possible. I've seen it happen with people who once believed they would never understand fast English. And you can be next. Now, before we get deeper into it, I want to ask you to do something simple, but important. If you've ever felt stuck when trying to follow native speakers, if you felt that pressure in your chest like you're falling behind, please take a moment right now to like this episode and subscribe to the English Talk community. Not just because it helps the channel, but because it helps you. It means you're saying yes to progress, yes to better listening, yes to feeling confident in real conversations. And every time you like or subscribe, you're telling yourself, I'm serious about this. I'm not giving up. I'm ready to take control of my English. And one more thing. Let's keep things relaxed today. This is not a class, and you won't be tested. This is your space. A place where we talk like friends, where you don't have to be perfect to participate, and where your small steps matter. So take a deep breath, grab a cup of tea or coffee, and give yourself permission to enjoy the process. We're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it simple. And by the end of this episode, I promise, you'll feel closer to understanding fast English than you ever have before. The journey doesn't have to be frustrating. You just need to look at it from a different angle. And that's what we're doing together today. Let's get into it. Let me tell you about someone I met a few years ago. His name is Mark, and he's from Berlin. Mark is one of those people who always took learning seriously. He studied English for many years, followed the traditional path: textbooks, grammar exercises, vocabulary lists, language tests. He even had a great accent when he spoke. You could tell that he had put in the effort. He wasn't a beginner by any means. After finishing his degree in computer science, Mark got a job opportunity in London. It was a big step forward for him. He was excited. He'd always dreamed of working in the UK, and now it was actually happening. The position was with a tech startup in East London. The interview was scheduled, the company sent the Zoom link, and everything seemed ready. Mark told me he had prepared answers to the most common interview questions. He had practiced them several times. He wasn't nervous about his English, at least not at first. But then, the interview started. The moment the interviewer began to speak, everything changed. Mark could hear the words, but he couldn't catch the meaning. The man had a thick London accent, spoke fast, used phrasal verbs and informal expressions. He said things like, "Let's kick things off," and "We're looking for someone who can hit the ground running." Mark had never heard those phrases before. He kept trying to translate in his head, word by word, but the sentences moved too quickly. It was like trying to catch a train that was already speeding away. He told me, "Julia, I felt like I knew every individual word, but somehow I didn't understand what he was saying. It was like the words didn't add up. I just froze." And here's the thing. Mark had studied English for more than 10 years. He passed the B2 and C1 exams, he had read novels in English, and he even wrote emails for international clients at his old job. But none of that helped in that moment because real spoken English, the way native speakers use it, is a different kind of challenge. It's not about how many words you know. It's about how those words are used. That interview lasted 25 minutes, but for Mark, it felt like an hour. He answered some questions, but most of the time he just smiled politely, nodded, and tried to hide the fact that he didn't understand half of what was being said. He wasn't able to show his true skills, not because he didn't know English, but because he didn't know how to listen to English the way it's really spoken. And let me be honest, that's such a common situation. I've heard similar stories from learners in Tokyo, in Cairo, in Madrid, in Jakarta. They prepare for years, but when they face a fast-speaking native speaker, they freeze. It's not a vocabulary problem, it's a listening problem. But even that isn't the full truth. It's actually a training problem. We're trained to hear English as if it were written. Slowly, clearly, carefully structured. But real English doesn't sound like that. People don't speak in full textbook sentences. They drop words, they connect sounds, they repeat themselves, they use informal chunks and expressions that you never see in a grammar book. So when someone like Mark goes into a real-world situation expecting perfect English, it's like stepping into a storm with no umbrella. I remember talking to Mark after that interview. He was discouraged. He said, "I thought I was ready. I thought my English was good enough." And that really stuck with me. Because good enough in school doesn't always mean good enough in conversation. But here's what I told him, and what I want to tell you now. The issue is not that your English isn't good. The issue is that no one taught you how to train your ears. Understanding fast English isn't about knowing more words. It's about recognizing patterns. It's about learning how real people actually speak. Once you understand that, everything starts to change. You stop listening for individual words, and you start listening for meaning, for rhythm, for tone. That's when you make the leap from school English to real English. What happened to Mark could happen to anyone. He had the knowledge, but not the practice. And honestly, that's why this community exists. To help you move from knowledge to practice. From words on a page to voices in your ears. From translation to real understanding. And I want you to think for a moment. Have you ever been in a situation like Mark's? Maybe a job interview or a conversation with a tourist, or even just watching a video online. Have you felt that same confusion? That sense of, I know these words, but I don't get what they're saying? If you have, I want you to know that this is exactly the kind of problem we can fix. Mark's story didn't end at that interview. He didn't give up. He realized that what he needed wasn't more grammar, but more exposure to natural English. He started listening every day to podcasts, YouTube channels, and TV shows without subtitles. But he didn't just listen. He listened actively. He focused on chunks of language, repeated them, slowed them down, shadowed the sentences out loud. He began to recognize the way native speakers link words, how they emphasize certain parts of a sentence, and how they simplify what they say in casual conversation. 6 months later, Mark had another interview, this time with a different company, also in London. And this time, things were different. The interviewer still spoke fast, still used native expressions, but Mark didn't panic. He followed the rhythm, picked up the meaning, and responded naturally. He got the job. And you know what? You can do the same. Let's talk about something that confuses almost every English learner at some point. Why does it feel like native speakers talk so fast? Now let me tell you something important. In most cases, they're not actually speaking faster than you. What they're doing is speaking differently. What sounds fast to you is often just unfamiliar rhythm, connected speech, and natural expressions that you haven't trained your ear to catch yet. When you listen to someone reading English from a book, you hear each word clearly. I am going to the store. Easy, right? But when a native speaker says it in a real conversation, it becomes something like, I'm on a go to the store. What just happened? Well, the words are all there, but they've been connected, reduced, and delivered in a rhythm that flows. That's how native speakers speak every day. They're not trying to be difficult. They're just speaking the way they've always spoken. This is something I always explain. Spoken English is not the same as written English. In writing, we separate each word with space. But in real conversation, people connect words, reduce them, drop syllables, and rely on rhythm and stress to communicate meaning. That's why it feels so fast. It's not just about speed, it's about unfamiliar patterns. Let me give you an example. Take the question, what are you going to do today? Now say it the way it appears in a textbook, slow, clear, and with each word separate. But when a native speaker says it casually, it might come out as, what are you going to do today? It's still English. Nothing has changed really, but the form has shifted. Let's break that down. What are you becomes what are ya. Going to becomes gonna. Do today becomes do today. These changes happen naturally, not because native speakers are trying to make English hard to understand, but because spoken language always moves toward efficiency and rhythm. This happens in every language. And when you hear someone speak like that, your brain might freeze, not because the words are new, but because your ear isn't trained to recognize them in that form. You're trying to hear each individual word, but English doesn't work like that in real conversations. It's like trying to see every tree in a forest when you should be looking at the path through the forest. You need to listen for the flow, not just the details. One of the most important mindset shifts you can make is this. Stop trying to understand English word by word. Start listening for patterns. Listen for how words connect. Listen for common expressions that appear again and again. Once you start doing that, things begin to slow down, at least in your mind. Because you're no longer trying to grab every single word. You're following the rhythm. Let me tell you about a student I worked with recently. Her name is Aisha, and she's from Casablanca. She's been living in Toronto for a year now, and in her first few months, she felt lost every time someone spoke to her casually. She told me, Julia, I understand English in movies when I use subtitles, and I understand my teacher in class. But when my roommate talks to me, I catch maybe half of it. So we sat down and listened to a short recording of a regular conversation. I asked her to write down what she heard. She stopped every few seconds trying to catch the exact words. Then I played it again, but this time I asked her to feel the rhythm. I told her not to worry about getting every word, just follow the energy of the sentence. After a few rounds, she began to notice something. The words that carried meaning, the content words, were easy to hear. The grammar words, is, are, to, of, were reduced or sometimes completely invisible. She said, it's like they're hiding. And I told her, exactly. That's how English hides inside its own rhythm. This is what I want you to focus on. Don't ask yourself, what is every word in this sentence? Ask yourself, what is this person trying to say? Native speakers often give you the answer in the tone, the stress, the flow. That's where meaning lives in natural speech, not in perfect pronunciation, not in textbook grammar, but in the movement of the sentence. You may also notice that some phrases always travel together. These are called chunks, and they're a huge part of why native speakers sound so smooth. Things like, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, kind of, or you wanna. When you recognize these chunks, you don't need to decode them word by word. Your brain just says, ah, I've heard this before, and the meaning becomes automatic. That's how you start catching the rhythm. Another point I want to highlight: you don't need to speak like this to understand it. Understanding fast English doesn't mean you need to copy it exactly. Your goal isn't to become someone else, it's to understand them. And to do that, you need to change the way you listen. So here's a small challenge for you. The next time you listen to a native speaker, whether in a video, a podcast, or in real life, try to notice how the words are linked together. Don't just focus on individual vocabulary. Pay attention to how the speaker moves through the sentence. Where do they pause? Where do they stress a word? What gets skipped or reduced? Every time you do this, you're training your brain to hear English as it's really spoken, not just as it's written. And if you find yourself thinking, "This is too fast," stop and ask, "What pattern am I missing here?" Often, it's not speed that's the issue, it's unfamiliarity. The more you listen, the more familiar these patterns become, and the more familiar they become, the slower they start to sound. Think of it like a song. The first time you hear a new song, you don't know the lyrics. It sounds fast, even confusing. But after you listen to it a few times, suddenly you start singing along, even if the words are quick. That's what we're doing with English. We're helping you learn the music of the language so you can dance with it, not fight against it. Let's keep training your ears together. Let me introduce you to Aiko. She's from Tokyo, Japan. And when we first met, she had one very specific goal. She wanted to watch her favorite English series without subtitles. Not just to follow the story, but to actually understand the characters, catch the jokes, feel the rhythm of the conversations, and experience the language in a natural way. But every time she tried, she got frustrated. Without the subtitles, she felt completely lost. And here's the thing. Aiko wasn't a beginner. She had studied English in school for years. She passed tests, memorized vocabulary lists, and even understood grammar rules better than many native speakers. But when it came to understanding real people talking in real time, especially actors speaking quickly and naturally, she felt like all her knowledge vanished. She told me, "Julia, it's like the words become a blur. I can hear them, but I can't follow them." Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you've watched a scene in a movie where someone says something emotional or funny, and the people around you start laughing or reacting, but you're still stuck on the first line thinking, "Wait, what did they say?" That was Aiko's experience every time she tried to understand English without reading. She would rewatch episodes again and again, thinking maybe repetition would help. But every time she removed the subtitles, the magic disappeared. It was as if the characters were suddenly speaking a different language, fast, mumbled, and unpredictable. At one point, she almost gave up. She told me, "Maybe I'll never understand English the way it's really spoken." And I said, "No, Aiko. You don't need to understand everything to start. You need to learn how to listen differently." So we changed the strategy. Instead of watching full episodes and trying to catch every line, we chose a different path. We focused on rhythm. We started with short scenes, just 5 or 10 seconds long, not even full conversations. I asked her to pick a scene she liked, something fun, maybe 2 characters talking over coffee. And then I told her, "Listen to this one part, over and over. Don't worry about the exact words right away. Just listen. Focus on how the sentence flows. Where does the speaker pause? What words are stressed? Which ones get swallowed or blurred?" We listened 5 times, then 10, and something amazing happened. Around the 8th time, she started feeling the sentence, not just hearing it. She repeated it out loud, not perfectly, but with the same energy, the same speed, the same rhythm. And even though she didn't catch every word, she began to guess what was being said. Her brain was learning the pattern. Let's take one of the lines she practiced. The character said, "You know, I've been thinking about that thing you said the other day." Now, in the scene, it sounded like, "You know, I've been thinking about that thing you said the other day." Totally compressed. But because Aiko listened so many times, and because she focused on the movement of the phrase, not the grammar, her ear started adapting. She could repeat it. She could feel the emotion. She wasn't stuck trying to translate each part. She was flowing with it. That changed everything for her. She told me, "Before, I used my eyes to understand English. Now, I'm learning to trust my ears." That shift, from visual to auditory, is powerful. When you read subtitles, your brain is working in a completely different way. You're not truly hearing English. You're reading a translation of what's being said, even if the translation is in English. But when you turn off the subtitles and start listening with intention, something else begins to grow: your listening muscle. And here's the beautiful part: Aiko didn't need hours every day. She used just a few minutes at a time. 5 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes before bed. She'd choose a short clip, listen repeatedly, try to copy the rhythm, and then speak it out loud. Sometimes she'd record herself. Sometimes she'd just shadow the speaker, speaking at the same time as the character, matching the flow as best she could. And the results didn't come all at once. They came slowly, like a song that becomes familiar the more you hear it. One day, she messaged me and said, "Julia, I watched half an episode today without subtitles and I understood most of it. Not everything, but enough to enjoy it." That's the moment I knew she had crossed the bridge. From seeing English as a code she had to crack, to experiencing it as a rhythm she could move with. So what can we take from Aiko's story? First, understanding native speakers isn't about understanding every word. It's about recognizing the rhythm of the language. Second, repetition is your best friend, but not passive repetition. Active listening, listening with purpose, listening with your whole attention. Third, you don't need to start big. In fact, it's better to start small. A single sentence, a short scene, a few seconds of audio. That's enough to train your ear if you're consistent. And finally, you don't need to do this alone. Aiko practiced alone most days, but she also asked questions, joined study groups, and talked to friends. She wasn't afraid to ask, "Did I say that right?" Or, "What did he just say?" Curiosity, not perfection, is what helped her improve. I want you to know that you can do exactly what Aiko did, no matter your level, no matter your background. If you feel frustrated because native speakers sound too fast, remember, it's not your fault. It's just that your ear hasn't had enough time with the real music of the language. But you can catch it. You can train it. You can learn to hear not just the words, but the meaning behind the rhythm. And once you do, everything starts to sound clearer. Not slower, maybe, but definitely more familiar. One of the most powerful changes you can make in your English learning journey is this: stop listening word by word. I know that might sound strange, especially if you've always been taught to focus on vocabulary and grammar step by step. But when it comes to real conversation, when native speakers talk naturally, they're not throwing words at you one by one like pieces of a puzzle. They're speaking in chunks, connected phrases, expressions, combinations that come out as one smooth sound. This concept is called chunking, and it's one of the best ways to finally start understanding fast, natural English. Let me explain what I mean by that. Think of the sentence, "I'm going to go." It's very simple, right? You've probably seen it in textbooks, maybe heard it in class, but when a native speaker says it quickly, it sounds like, "I'm gonna go." And sometimes even faster, more like, "I'm on a go." If you're trying to catch every single word as a separate unit, you'll probably get lost. You might think you didn't hear going or to, or you'll stop to mentally translate, and by the time you figured it out, the conversation has already moved on. That's why listening for phrases, not isolated words, is so important. Native speakers group words together and say them as one rhythm unit. They're not thinking of grammar while they speak. They've practiced these expressions so many times, they come out naturally. And the good news is, you can train yourself to hear and use these chunks too. Let me give you another example. Think about the phrase, "What do you want to do?" It's a normal question, right? But listen to how it sounds in a real conversation. Most native speakers say, "What do you want to do?" That's one chunk. They're not pausing between each word. The rhythm is smooth, and if your brain is still trying to process, "What do you want?" it's going to feel impossible to keep up. But once you start recognizing the whole chunk, "What do you want to do?" it becomes like a familiar melody. You don't need to stop and analyze every piece. You just understand it. And that's what fluent listening is really about. I often compare this to listening to music. When you hear your favorite song, do you analyze every single word the singer is saying? Probably not. You feel the emotion, you remember the phrases, you sing along with the chorus. That's because music is all about patterns, rhythms, and repetition. And the same approach works when learning spoken English. You listen, you repeat, and you let your brain absorb the chunks naturally. So, how do you start chunking? First, stop trying to hear every word. It's okay if some words are unclear at first. Focus on the phrase as a whole. What does it sound like? How does it feel when spoken quickly? Close your eyes and listen to a short clip from a movie or a podcast. Don't try to understand it fully on the first try. Just listen to the flow. Can you identify where one phrase ends and the next begins? Second, repeat the chunk out loud. This is key. Your mouth needs to feel the phrase just like your ears need to hear it. Repetition out loud helps your brain store the chunk as one single unit. You're no longer remembering I plus am plus going plus to plus go. You're remembering I'm gonna go. That's a huge difference. Third, collect useful chunks. Make a small list of common phrases you hear often. For example, how's it going? Let me see. I don't know. What's going on? Do you want to come? These are expressions that native speakers use all the time. Listen to them in context. Repeat them. Use them when you speak. You'll start to recognize them naturally when you hear others talk. A student of mine, originally from Warsaw, once told me she felt like a robot when speaking English. She said, "I'm always building sentences in my head. I can't just speak freely." I asked her to stop focusing on building every sentence from scratch and start borrowing chunks from real conversations. She began collecting them from series, interviews, and music. She practiced saying them the way native speakers said them, intonation, rhythm, all of it. After a few weeks, she came back and said, "Julia, I finally had a conversation where I wasn't thinking. I just said the phrase." That's chunking in action. Now let's think about how this helps with understanding fast English. If you try to hear a sentence word by word, your brain is doing too much. You're analyzing, translating, interpreting, all at once. But if you hear the sentence as a few chunks, you simplify the process. Your brain says, "I've heard this before. I know this pattern." And that's when your understanding speeds up. Here's a practical tip. Take a favorite scene from a movie, just 30 seconds. Write down what you think you hear. Then check the subtitles. Compare your version with the real one. You'll probably find that many of the words were said as one unit, and you missed them because you were listening word by word. Don't worry, that's part of the learning process. Now listen again, knowing the chunks. Repeat them. Say them out loud. Do it 5 times. You'll notice a difference almost immediately. I also recommend shadowing. This means listening to a short sentence and repeating it at the same time as the speaker, like an echo. It's not about getting every word perfect. It's about copying the sound and flow. If you do this with chunks, your brain will start hearing English differently. You'll recognize the phrases without effort. And remember, this is how native speakers learn too. As children, they didn't learn language word by word. They heard full expressions, "I don't know," "It's okay," "Let me do it," and repeated them thousands of times. That's how fluency is built. Not through translation, but through repetition of real phrases in real context. If you change your mindset from studying words to listening to chunks, everything becomes easier. You'll stop feeling like English is a code you have to solve, and instead it'll feel like a song you're learning to sing. Let the rhythm guide you. Let the repetition help you. And most of all, enjoy the process. You're not just learning words, you're learning how people actually speak. And that is what makes all the difference. Let me tell you a story about Samuel, a listener from Nairobi, Kenya. Samuel had a dream that many of you probably share. He always wanted to move to the United States, not just for work or study, but because he felt a deep connection with the culture. He grew up watching American movies, listening to pop music, and imagining what it would be like to live in New York or Los Angeles. He studied English in school, took grammar lessons seriously, and even passed advanced level exams. On paper, Samuel was fluent. But then reality hit him hard. When he started listening to real American podcasts, he felt completely lost. He thought, "Why is this happening? I understand English. I've been studying it for years." But even when the topics were familiar, the way people spoke on those podcasts made it feel like a completely different language. He would listen to a 20-minute episode, and all he could catch were a few words here and there. The rest was a blur. Fast sentences, unclear sounds, casual expressions. He felt overwhelmed and frustrated. He started questioning if he was really ready to live in an English-speaking country. But instead of giving up, Samuel decided to change something. He stopped trying to understand everything at once and started focusing on just a few phrases that kept showing up. In one episode, he noticed someone saying, "You know what I mean," over and over again. At first, he didn't pay much attention, but then he thought, maybe I should learn this phrase exactly as it is. So he wrote it down, repeated it to himself, and tried to recognize it the next time it came up. And just like that, something clicked. He began noticing that "you know what I mean" wasn't just a random expression, it was a signal, a pattern. It usually came at the end of a sentence, when the speaker wanted to check that the listener was following. It became an anchor. No matter how fast the speaker talked, when Samuel heard that phrase, he could catch his breath and refocus. It gave him context. It gave him confidence. So he kept going. In the next podcast, he heard another phrase several times. Kind of like. Again, at first it sounded like filler, like something people just say without meaning. But when he paid closer attention, he realized it helped explain ideas. People used it to compare things, or to give an example. For instance, it's kind of like when you're waiting in line and someone just cuts in front of you. Suddenly, the sentence made sense. Samuel understood the story because the phrase gave him a structure. He started collecting these expressions, not individual words, phrases. He didn't try to memorize definitions. Instead, he listened to how they were used in context. He repeated them, not just once, but several times out loud. He would walk around his neighborhood in Nairobi repeating, "You know what I mean," kind of like, "Let me tell you something." I guess so. It turns out, at the end of the day, these phrases became the foundation of his listening, because once he knew them, he started hearing them everywhere. They acted like signposts in the conversation. Even if the rest of the sentence was fast or unclear, he could catch these expressions and get the meaning. He no longer needed to understand every word. He just needed enough to follow the conversation. And that changed everything. What I love about Samuel's story is how practical it is. He didn't wait for a perfect lesson. He didn't need a special course. He just opened his ears to real English and started noticing patterns. He used repetition. He let go of the pressure to be perfect. And by focusing on the most common everyday expressions, he unlocked a huge part of spoken English that many learners miss. We often think of fluency as speaking fast or knowing difficult vocabulary. But in reality, fluent conversation relies heavily on simple, repeated phrases. Native speakers use them all the time, without even thinking. That's why when you learn these everyday expressions, you step into the rhythm of real English. You stop feeling like an outsider, and you start participating. Samuel eventually moved to the US, and he told me that his first few months were way easier than he expected. He said, "I didn't understand everything, but I recognized enough. I could follow the flow, because I had trained my ears to catch the phrases people use all the time." That's the power of focusing on chunks instead of words, and on rhythm instead of translation. He still practices. Even today, he takes 5 minutes every morning to listen to short podcast clips, identify phrases, repeat them, and imagine using them in real conversations. He says that routine keeps his listening skills sharp, and more than that, it keeps him connected to the language in a natural, meaningful way. So if you ever feel like Samuel, lost in the flow of fast conversations, remember that you don't need to catch everything. Start small. Pick 1 or 2 expressions you hear often. Practice them. Use them. Repeat them until they become automatic. This simple shift can make a huge difference. Everyday phrases are not just language tools. They are mental shortcuts that help you process what you hear in real time. And when you train your brain to recognize them, you stop translating and start understanding. That's what happened to Samuel, and that's what can happen to you too. Let's talk about something that I know many of you have probably felt at some point, the desire to ask native speakers to slow down. Maybe you've been in a conversation where someone is talking so fast, and your brain is just screaming, "Please, slow down." It's completely understandable. When we're learning a new language, speed feels like the enemy. You're trying to process every word, translate it in your head, understand the meaning, and then respond. All while the conversation just keeps moving. It can feel overwhelming. But here's something that might surprise you. Trying to slow other people down is not the solution. In fact, it can sometimes make things harder in the long run. The truth is, native speakers aren't trying to confuse you. They're not even always speaking fast intentionally. They're just speaking naturally, using the rhythm and speed that they've used their entire lives. And if your goal is to understand real English, the kind spoken in everyday conversations, movies, meetings, or even friendships, then your brain has to learn how to deal with that natural speed. Not fight it, but adapt to it. Adapting to speed is a process. You don't need to jump straight into understanding every single word in a fast conversation. What you need is a gradual training method that helps your brain become familiar with natural spoken English. One of the most powerful techniques I always recommend is this. Choose a short clip of native speech, something real, something natural, and something interesting to you, and listen to it first at normal speed. Just listen. Don't try to understand every word. Just notice the flow. How does it sound? Which words are easy to catch? Which parts feel like a blur? Then, slow it down. You can use tools like YouTube's playback speed or podcast apps that allow speed adjustment. Bring it down to 0. 75x or even 0.5x if needed. Listen again. Now your brain will begin to notice more details. You might hear where one word ends and the next begins. You'll catch those reduced sounds, the parts that used to disappear when things were fast. You'll hear the connections between words, like gonna instead of going to or wanna instead of want to. You'll notice how intonation works, how voices rise and fall, and how meaning is communicated through tone as much as through words. After that, go back and listen to it again at normal speed. You'll be amazed at what happens. Suddenly, the same fast clip that felt impossible just a few minutes ago starts to feel more familiar. You understand more. You're not translating anymore. You're recognizing. Your brain is adjusting. That's the magic of training with speed variation. This process is not about perfection. It's about exposure and consistency. Your brain needs to hear real English, not classroom English, not slow recordings designed for beginners, but the kind of English you actually want to understand in the real world. The more you expose yourself to it, and the more you train using this slow, fast, slow method, the more natural it becomes. Let me give you an example from my own experience working with students. I once worked with a young woman named Layla from Istanbul. She was an intermediate English learner, and she was very good with grammar and vocabulary. But when she watched interviews or tried to follow conversations with native speakers, she would panic. She told me, "They speak too fast. I can't understand anything." I gave her the exact same advice I'm giving you now. I asked her to find a podcast she liked, something with native speakers, and pick a short section, around 30 seconds. First, she listened at normal speed and just tried to get the feeling of the language. Then she slowed it down to 0.75x, wrote down a few phrases she could catch, and then tried again at full speed. After doing this every day for 2 weeks, she came back to me and said something I'll never forget. She said, "Julia, I didn't know my brain could change this fast. I actually understand them now, even at full speed." That's the power of training. Not forcing yourself to catch everything right away, but letting your brain grow into the rhythm of the language. I want you to think of native English like a river. It flows. Sometimes it's calm, sometimes it moves fast, and sometimes it twists and turns unexpectedly. If you try to stop it, you'll feel resistance. But if you learn to float with it, to move along with the current, everything becomes easier. Your goal is not to control the speed of the river, it's to learn how to swim in it. So when you feel frustrated, when you think, "Why do they speak so fast?" remember this: speed is not your enemy. It's a signal. It's a sign that you are now moving toward real English, and your brain is more capable than you think. It can learn to follow that speed, not by force, but by regular exposure and smart strategies. Every time you train your ears using speed variation, you're building mental flexibility. You're teaching your brain to stop trying to catch every single word and instead to focus on rhythm, intonation, and patterns. That's how children learn language. They don't understand every word adults say to them, but they hear it again and again. They catch the tone, they feel the rhythm, and slowly everything starts to make sense. You can do the same. And the best part? You don't need hours every day. Just 10 or 15 minutes of focused listening can make a huge difference. Find something you love, an interview, a scene from your favorite show, a piece of a podcast, and train with it. First at normal speed, then slower, then back to normal. Repeat this over time. Make it part of your daily practice. You'll be surprised how quickly your brain adapts. Language is not a test to pass. It's a living experience to participate in. You don't need to understand everything right away. You just need to keep showing up, keep listening, and keep giving your brain the tools it needs to grow. So don't fight the speed. Flow with it, train for it, and let it become your new normal. Let me tell you a story that I think many of you will connect with. It's about Elisa, a young woman from Madrid who had studied English for years. She was confident reading in English, she could write decent emails, and even her grammar was solid. But there was one area where she always felt lost: listening to native speakers, especially when they were joking, improvising, or speaking fast. She told me once, "Julia, I love watching interviews on YouTube, but I just laugh when the audience laughs. I don't really get the jokes." And I knew exactly what she meant. Comedy in English is one of the most challenging things for learners. It's fast, full of cultural references, wordplay, rhythm changes, and unexpected phrases. But Elisa didn't give up. She wanted to understand the jokes, not just the basic meaning behind a sentence. And one day, she discovered a technique that completely shifted the way she listened: shadowing. If you haven't heard of it, shadowing is when you listen to a short piece of spoken English and try to repeat it immediately, with the same rhythm, tone, and speed as the speaker. You don't stop the video. You speak along with it like an echo. At first, Elisa told me it felt strange. She picked a short video of a British comedian she liked, not because she understood everything, but because she liked his energy. She chose one clip and shadowed it every day for a week. At the beginning, she could barely keep up. She would stumble over the sentences, fall behind, and feel frustrated, but she kept going. The goal wasn't to be perfect. It was to match the rhythm. She wasn't worried about understanding every word at first. She just wanted to get her mouth and brain used to the speed. And something fascinating started to happen. By the third day, she was catching more words. By the fifth day, she could anticipate what the comedian would say next. And after 1 week, she understood a joke without needing subtitles. She laughed, not because the audience laughed, but because she finally got it. That was the turning point for her. Elisa started building a new habit. She would find short clips, comedy bits, interviews, or even scenes from movies, and use them for shadowing practice. She would listen once just to enjoy it. Then she'd shadow it, even if she didn't understand everything. Then she'd go back, slow it down, look up a phrase or two, and then shadow it again at normal speed. It became a routine, 10 minutes a day. That was it. But the progress was visible. In just a few weeks, her listening comprehension exploded. What she didn't expect, though, was how this practice affected her confidence. Before, she used to avoid fast conversations. If someone spoke quickly at a party or in a meeting, she would just smile and nod. Now, she was jumping into conversations, responding with more ease, and even adding her own jokes. Not because she had memorized a list of phrases, but because her ears were trained to hear English as it is actually spoken. She had learned to process sound patterns, not just vocabulary. And that's the real power of shadowing. It doesn't just train your pronunciation, it sharpens your listening. You stop focusing on individual words and start recognizing chunks of speech. You learn the melody of English. You internalize the rhythm. You begin to feel the language, not just understand it. And when that happens, communication becomes more natural. You stop translating in your head. You respond faster. You connect more. I remember Elisa telling me something powerful. She said, "Shadowing made me brave. I used to be afraid of fast English. Now I chase it." That shift, from fear to curiosity, is what transforms a learner into a confident speaker. She didn't wait until she understood everything to start practicing. She practiced even when things felt unclear. She repeated phrases she didn't fully get at first, and little by little, those phrases became familiar. Those unfamiliar sounds became patterns. The jokes became understandable. The fear disappeared. The other thing Elisa discovered along the way was that native speakers repeat themselves a lot. In comedy especially, there are setups and punchlines that follow patterns. If you watch enough clips, you start to hear the same phrases again and again. You know what I mean? Here's the thing. I'm not saying. These expressions show up constantly. And when you shadow them, they become part of your own English. Not because you memorize them, but because your mouth and ears got used to them working together. She also learned to pause less and trust more. At first, she tried to understand everything before speaking. But with shadowing, there's no time to pause. You speak while you listen. And this forces your brain to stop overthinking and start responding. It's like a workout for your fluency. Not just passive listening, but active training. It's challenging, but it's powerful. Elisa told me once that the first time she understood a full joke in English, she felt like she had climbed a mountain. But then she realized something even more important. It wasn't about the joke itself. It was about the moment she stopped feeling like an outsider in the language. She wasn't guessing anymore. She was participating. That sense of belonging, That feeling of being in the conversation instead of watching from the outside, that's what makes all the practice worth it. So if you're listening to this and thinking, I want to understand fast English, I want to get the jokes, I want to feel confident, then maybe it's time to try shadowing. Start with a video you enjoy, even if you don't catch every word. Play it, listen once, then play it again, and repeat what you hear. Match the rhythm. Don't worry about being perfect. Just stay with the speaker. And over time, you'll feel your ears waking up. Your responses will get quicker. Your understanding will deepen. That's what happened with Elisa, and it can happen for you too. Shadowing is not magic. It's consistent practice. But when done regularly, it builds something that every English learner wants: natural understanding. And with that comes confidence, clarity, and real connection. Keep going even when it's hard. Because just like Elisa, you're closer than you think. One of the biggest shifts that changed how I understand and teach English listening is this simple idea. Stop trying to catch every single word. I know that sounds strange. I know it might even feel wrong at first. You've spent years studying vocabulary, memorizing word lists, and trying to expand your knowledge of English one word at a time. So when you listen to a native speaker, your brain automatically wants to catch it all. Every word, every sound. And when you miss one, there's panic. You feel like you're lost, like you failed. But here's the truth. Even native speakers don't catch every single word in a fast conversation. What they do is listen for meaning. They focus on the message, not the details. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a conversation where you understood every single word, but still didn't really get what the person meant? Or the opposite, where you missed a few words but still understood the main idea? That's what I'm talking about. Listening for meaning is a skill, and it's something you can train. The problem with trying to understand every word is that it slows you down. It creates this constant pressure to translate, to analyze, to follow perfectly. And that's exhausting. You don't have time to process everything at native speed. So your brain gets overwhelmed. And then you freeze. You stop listening. You feel frustrated. I've seen this happen so many times with students who are actually quite advanced, but still struggle with real conversations, movies, podcasts, or group discussions. Not because they lack vocabulary, but because they're trying too hard to be perfect. I always tell my students, perfection is not the goal. Communication is. Understanding the general idea, the emotion, the intention behind the words, that's what really matters. That's what native speakers are doing when they listen. They're not thinking, what exact word was that? They're thinking, what's this person trying to say? So how do you start listening this way? You begin by asking better questions. Instead of asking yourself, what did that word mean? Try asking, what is this conversation about? Or, what's the speaker's point? When you listen to a podcast or watch a video, pause after 1 minute and ask yourself, can I summarize this in one sentence? If you can do that, even if you missed a few expressions or didn't catch a joke, you're training the right skill. Comprehension, not perfection. Context is your best friend. Let's say you hear someone say, so, yeah, we were going to go to the beach, but then it started pouring, so we just stayed in and watched a movie instead. Maybe you didn't catch the word pouring. Maybe it flew by too fast. But you heard, we were going to go to the beach, and then we just stayed in and watched a movie. That tells you something happened that ruined the plan. You don't need to know that pouring means heavy rain. The meaning is still clear. And maybe later, you look it up and realize what it meant. That's a natural way to learn. It sticks better because it's connected to a situation, a feeling, a real moment. Another thing I recommend is practicing with materials that have strong visual or emotional context. Watch a short video clip with facial expressions, gestures, and movement. These help your brain make sense of the language. You can often guess the meaning of a sentence based on how it's said, not just what's said. Tone, rhythm, and body language all play a role. So when you focus too much on the words, you miss out on all these other clues that help you understand faster and more naturally. Think about how children learn their first language. They're not reading subtitles. They're not using dictionaries. They're watching people's faces, listening to tone, recognizing repeated phrases, and slowly connecting those things to meaning. It takes time, but it works. You're not a child anymore, but your brain still works the same way when it comes to learning language through exposure and pattern recognition. You just need to allow yourself the space to listen without pressure. I know the temptation is strong to stop and rewind every time you miss something. And yes, sometimes that's useful, especially when you're learning a specific phrase. But not every time. Give yourself permission to let things go. Trust that if a word is important, you'll hear it again. Trust that your brain can fill in the blanks when it knows the bigger picture. One method that helps with this is called top-down listening. That means using what you already know, your knowledge of the world, the topic, the situation, to understand what you hear. If someone says, "Let's grab a bite," and you're at lunchtime with coworkers, you don't need to analyze the phrase. You already know the context. They're talking about eating. So even if you've never heard "grab a bite" before, you can guess it means getting food. That's top-down listening. It's not about understanding the vocabulary first. It's about using the situation to guide your comprehension. On the other hand, bottom-up listening is when you focus on the sounds and words themselves. You need both skills, but most learners spend too much time on the bottom-up part. They forget that understanding often comes from looking at the big picture first. Start with the big picture. Zoom in only when necessary. And let me tell you, when you start listening for meaning instead of words, something amazing happens. You relax. You stop panicking when you miss something. You stay in the conversation longer. You feel more confident. Your brain isn't working overtime trying to translate everything. You're simply present. And that presence helps you hear more, not less. I remember one student told me, "Julia, the moment I stopped trying to understand every word was the moment I started enjoying English." That's exactly it. Language is not a puzzle to solve. It's a tool for connection. And understanding is not about catching 100% of the words. It's about getting the message. So next time you listen to a native speaker, take a deep breath. Don't freeze when you miss a word. Ask yourself, what's the general idea here? Let your brain work with the information it has. Trust the context. Trust your instincts. And most importantly, give yourself permission to understand imperfectly, because that's how real understanding begins. I want to share a story about Amir from Cairo, who had an experience many of you might find familiar. Amir had studied English for years. He felt confident reading and writing, and even speaking a bit. But when he traveled to New York City for the first time, he was faced with a real challenge: understanding English when it's fast, natural, and full of expressions. One day, Amir was at a busy subway station trying to find his way. He approached the ticket counter, ready to ask for help, but the moment the attendant started speaking, everything became a blur. The words were fast, the accent strong, and Amir couldn't catch everything. He felt a wave of confusion and frustration. He wasn't sure what the person was saying, and his mind started racing, trying to piece together what he could remember. It felt overwhelming. But instead of giving up, Amir decided to focus on something different. He noticed the tone of the attendant's voice, the rhythm, the pauses. He looked around at the signs, the maps, and the flow of people. He paid attention to the context, the situation he was in, the place, the sounds of the subway. Slowly, he realized that even though he hadn't understood every word, he could grasp the main idea. The attendant was explaining how to buy a ticket and where to go next. The voice had a friendly, helpful tone, which gave him confidence. Amir took a deep breath and asked a few simple questions using the words he knew. The attendant smiled and repeated instructions clearly, and Amir followed the signs. He made it to the platform on time. This experience was a big lesson for Amir. It showed him that understanding English is not about catching every single word, but about paying attention to the overall meaning. When you focus on the sense of what's being said, the tone, the context, the gestures, it becomes much easier to follow a conversation, even if some words fly by. Amir's story reminds us that listening is a skill that goes beyond vocabulary. It's about connecting sounds to meaning, using everything around you to help decode the message. Many learners get stuck trying to translate word by word, which slows down comprehension and increases frustration. Amir could have panicked when he missed words, but instead he tuned into the speaker's intonation and the situation. Intonation is like music. It tells you if someone is asking a question, giving instructions, or making a statement. Paying attention to this helps your brain fill in gaps when words aren't clear. It's a natural way to understand fast speech. The context, like the subway setting, provides clues that guide your understanding. When you combine these elements, you start to hear English the way native speakers do, holistically, not word by word. I remember talking to Amir after his trip. He told me that at first he felt embarrassed because he thought he should understand everything perfectly. But then he realized that native speakers don't expect perfect understanding all the time. They are used to different accents and varying levels of fluency. What matters most is that you get the main point and respond confidently. That confidence grows with practice and with shifting your focus from perfect accuracy to practical communication. This is a very useful mindset to adopt, especially for those who want to travel, study, or work in English-speaking environments. You don't need to understand every phrase perfectly to get things done. Sometimes, paying attention to tone and context is enough to navigate a situation successfully. And over time, your brain learns to catch more details naturally, without extra effort. Amir's story also highlights the importance of real-life practice. Classroom learning is great for grammar and vocabulary, but nothing replaces the experience of listening to natural speech in real situations. If you don't have the chance to travel, you can still create those moments. Listen to videos, podcasts, or interviews with native speakers in everyday contexts. Try to guess the meaning from the tone and context before looking up words. This trains your brain to listen for meaning, not just individual words. And remember, making mistakes or missing parts of a conversation is normal and part of learning. Amir didn't understand everything at first, but he stayed calm and used strategies that helped him. That's what I want you to do. When you find yourself lost in a conversation, stop worrying about missing words. Listen to the overall meaning, notice how the speaker's voice changes, and use the environment around you to guide your understanding. This story is a great example of how patience and attention to detail beyond words can unlock better comprehension. It's about training your ears and mind to work together. Amir's subway confusion turned into a success because he changed his approach. You can do the same in your journey with English. Keep practicing, keep listening, and trust that understanding will come, not because you hear every word, but because you know how to catch the meaning behind them. When it comes to improving your listening skills, one of the most effective approaches I've found, and personally recommend, is practicing in layers. This means starting with easier, clearer audio and gradually moving to real-life, natural speech. It's like training any muscle in your body. You wouldn't immediately lift heavy weights without warming up first. The same goes for your ears and brain when it comes to English listening. You want to build your understanding step by step, allowing your mind to adjust to different speeds, accents, and styles of speaking without feeling overwhelmed or frustrated. I always suggest beginning with materials that are designed specifically for learners. For example, podcasts that are made for English learners are a fantastic place to start. These podcasts often feature slower speech, clear pronunciation, and vocabulary that's appropriate for your level. When you listen to these, your brain has the chance to recognize sounds, words, and sentence structures without rushing. It's like learning the basic rhythm of the language before trying to dance to a complex song. As you listen to these educational podcasts, you'll notice yourself understanding more, and you'll feel motivated because you can actually follow the conversation. After you feel comfortable with those kinds of audios, it's time to challenge yourself a little more. This is where you move on to more natural but still somewhat controlled materials, such as interviews with native speakers. Interviews are great because the speakers often enunciate more clearly than in casual conversation, and the topics tend to be structured. You'll hear different accents, intonations, and sometimes faster speech. This step helps you get used to the real way people talk when they're explaining ideas, sharing stories, or discussing opinions. By practicing with interviews, you train your ear to pick up not only the words but the emotional tone behind what's being said. Once you've practiced with interviews and feel more confident, the next layer is to expose yourself to real-life conversations, like those you'd hear on the street, in cafes, or in vlogs. These can be more difficult because they often include slang, contractions, interruptions, and people talking over each other. The speech is more spontaneous and less perfect. But this layer is essential if you want to understand native speakers in their natural environment. Listening to vlogs from people around the world who speak English is an excellent way to hear different accents and everyday expressions. It's like stepping into their world and hearing how English really sounds when it's used naturally. What's important to remember is not to skip these layers. Sometimes learners get frustrated and jump straight into watching movies or TV shows without the foundation they need. While watching movies and TV is fun and helpful, it can be overwhelming if your ears aren't used to fast, casual speech yet. By practicing progressively, from easy to more challenging, you give your brain the time it needs to build confidence and comprehension. Think of it as climbing a ladder. Each step prepares you for the next, so you don't fall or feel stuck. Also, using this layered approach helps your brain adjust to different listening situations. Each type of audio develops a slightly different listening skill. For example, educational podcasts help you hear individual words and phrases clearly. Interviews train you to understand more complex sentence structures and opinions. Real-life conversations improve your ability to catch expressions, tone, and fast speech that you won't find in textbooks. By practicing all these layers, you become a more flexible listener, ready to face any kind of English speaker. One practical tip I always share is to dedicate time daily or weekly to practice at least one of these layers. Maybe on Monday and Wednesday, you listen to an educational podcast that teaches you new vocabulary and clear pronunciation. On Friday, you might watch a short interview with a native speaker talking about something that interests you, like travel or technology. On the weekend, try watching a vlog or a casual conversation clip. This variety keeps your practice fresh and trains different skills. Over time, you'll notice that you start understanding faster speech naturally because your brain is used to hearing English in many different forms. It's also important to be patient with yourself during this process. Listening to English spoken by native speakers is a challenge for everyone, even for advanced learners. Your brain needs time to recognize patterns, connect sounds, and predict what comes next. The key is consistent, focused practice. When you practice in layers, you reduce frustration and increase success because you're not expecting too much too soon. You're allowing yourself to grow your skills gradually, which leads to real confidence. Another thing to keep in mind is that practicing in layers is not just about passive listening. Try to be active by repeating phrases, mimicking intonation, and noting down new expressions. When you listen to a podcast or interview, pause and say the sentences out loud. This helps your brain and mouth get used to the sounds and rhythms of English. With real-life conversations, try to catch the gist and then go back to listen again to catch details you missed. Repetition is a powerful tool in language learning. Finally, layering your listening practice can also help reduce the anxiety that often comes with understanding fast English. When you know that you have prepared by practicing clear and slower speech first, you'll feel less intimidated when faced with fast native speakers. This gradual exposure builds resilience. You'll find that over time, what once sounded like a blur becomes something you can actually enjoy listening to, even if you don't understand every word. So start with easy, learner-friendly materials, move on to more natural interviews, and then immerse yourself in real-life conversations. Keep practicing these layers regularly, and you will notice how your listening skills develop step by step. Your ears and brain will get stronger, and understanding native speakers, even when they speak fast, will become much easier and more natural for you. Let me tell you about Priya from Mumbai. Priya had been studying English for years, but she always struggled when it came to understanding native speakers, especially when they spoke quickly or used slang. She felt stuck because she could read and write well, but when it came to listening, everything seemed blurry and confusing. What changed for Priya was when she decided to create a simple but consistent listening routine with 3 clear phases, and that routine made a huge difference in her ability to understand spoken English, even the tricky stuff like British comedy shows, which had always seemed impossible before. Priya's routine began with educational videos, those made specifically for learners like her. These videos were clear, slower, and full of explanations. She would listen to 1 or 2 every day, focusing on understanding the key ideas rather than every single word. She found that this first phase helped her tune her ears to English sounds and phrases without feeling overwhelmed. Because the language was simple and well-pronounced, she could pick up new vocabulary and expressions little by little, and that built her confidence. She also liked to pause and repeat sentences to practice the rhythm and intonation. This kind of focused listening was her foundation. After a few weeks, Priya moved on to phase 2, watching series with subtitles in English. She chose shows that she enjoyed, sometimes dramas, sometimes light comedies, because enjoying the content made her want to keep going. Watching with subtitles helped her connect what she heard with the written words, making it easier to catch new expressions and follow the story. She started noticing how native speakers shortened words or linked sounds together, things that are not obvious when you only study grammar or vocabulary in books. Subtitles gave her a safety net, so she didn't feel lost. This phase helped her understand the flow of natural conversations, even if the speech was faster than the educational videos. Priya's third phase was the biggest challenge, but also the most rewarding, watching videos without subtitles. At first, it felt almost impossible. She tried watching British comedy videos, which are famous for fast speech, slang, and lots of humor based on wordplay. These were intimidating at first, and she missed many jokes and expressions. But because she had already trained her ears in the first two phases, she could understand much more than before. She started recognizing common phrases and rhythms, and over time, the speed didn't scare her anymore. Even when she didn't catch everything, she focused on understanding the overall meaning and the emotions behind what was being said. She rewatched videos multiple times, each time catching something new. This patient and persistent approach helped her gradually improve her real-life listening skills. What I love about Priya's story is how she didn't expect to understand everything overnight. She was kind to herself and respected the process. By breaking down her listening practice into manageable phases, she built up her ability step by step without frustration. She turned listening practice into a routine, which made it easier to stay consistent. Consistency is key in language learning, especially when it comes to listening, because your brain needs time to adjust to different sounds, accents, and speeds. Priya's routine gave her that time in a structured way. Another important part of Priya's success was that she chose content that motivated her. Whether it was educational videos at the start or British comedy shows later, the material was interesting and relevant to her. When you enjoy what you listen to, it's easier to focus and remember new words and phrases. Priya also didn't rely solely on passive listening. She actively repeated phrases, mimicked the speaker's intonation, and sometimes wrote down new expressions. This active engagement made the learning stick. Priya's experience shows that even if you feel overwhelmed by fast English spoken by natives, a clear, gradual routine can make a huge difference. Start with easier materials to build your foundation, move on to more natural speech with subtitles to connect sounds and words, and then challenge yourself with authentic videos without subtitles. It's normal to miss words or jokes at first. Don't let that discourage you. Focus on the meaning, keep practicing, and your brain will start recognizing patterns automatically. Over time, you will surprise yourself by understanding more and more, even when the speech is fast or filled with slang. Remember, the key is to be patient and consistent, like Priya. Create your own listening routine that fits your schedule and interests. Maybe it's listening to educational podcasts in the morning, watching a favorite TV show with subtitles in the evening, and on weekends trying out videos without subtitles. This layered approach trains your brain and ears step by step, making fast English less intimidating and more enjoyable. Priya's story is a great example of how dedication and smart strategies can turn listening from a challenge into a strength. You don't need to understand every word to get better. Instead, focus on the process, enjoy the journey, and keep moving forward. Your listening skills will improve, and with them, your confidence to join conversations and connect with native speakers will grow. It's all about building those listening muscles little by little, just like Priya did. I want to talk with you today about something really important: being patient with yourself as you learn to understand fast English spoken by native speakers. I know how frustrating it can feel when you listen to someone speaking quickly and you don't catch everything, or maybe you catch a few words but miss the full meaning. It feels like you're stuck or not making progress. But here's the truth: progress often happens quietly, without you noticing it right away. Your brain is learning, even when you feel like you're not. When I say progress happens in silence, I mean that so much of what you're learning is happening beneath the surface. Your brain is working hard to recognize sounds, rhythms, and patterns. Even when you don't understand every word, or even if you feel confused or overwhelmed, your mind is absorbing information and adapting to the new sounds of English. This process doesn't always show up as immediate understanding or quick improvement, but it's happening. Think of it like planting seeds. You water them and take care of them, but the plants don't grow instantly. They grow slowly underground before they bloom. That's exactly what your brain is doing as you listen regularly to English. One thing I always remind people in the English Talk community is that it's much more important to keep your listening habit going than to worry about understanding every single word right now. It's okay if you miss details. Don't let that make you stop or feel discouraged. The real victory is consistency, the daily or weekly practice that builds your listening muscle over time. If you keep listening, your brain will gradually catch more sounds and meanings, and you'll start to notice that things you used to miss now make sense. It's normal to want instant results. I get it because I've been there myself. When I started learning English, I remember feeling so impatient and anxious when I couldn't follow fast conversations. I wanted to understand everything immediately, but that just made me tense and frustrated. The turning point for me was realizing that progress doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. Sometimes it's subtle, and that's okay. The important thing is to trust the process and be patient with yourself. I often see people trying to rush their listening practice by watching videos with subtitles all the time, or stopping every few seconds to look up every new word. While this can help in some ways, it can also slow down your progress, because it breaks the natural flow of the language. Instead, I encourage you to listen more freely sometimes, even if you don't understand everything. Let your brain get used to the sounds and rhythms without pressure. Over time, those sounds will become familiar, and your understanding will improve naturally. Another thing I want to share is that patience means being kind to yourself. Learning a language is a journey full of ups and downs. There will be days when everything feels clear and easy, and other days when you feel lost. That's completely normal. Don't judge yourself harshly on the days when it's harder. Remember, even small steps forward count. Celebrate your little wins, like recognizing a phrase you didn't know before or catching the gist of a fast conversation. Sometimes, when you don't notice your progress, it helps to look back and compare. Maybe a few weeks ago you couldn't understand a podcast or a YouTube video, but now you can follow the story much better. That's evidence that your brain has been working hard behind the scenes. Keep those moments in mind when you feel discouraged. They remind you that your efforts are paying off. I also want you to remember that learning English is not just about listening. Your brain is connecting all your skills: reading, speaking, writing, and listening at the same time. So even if your listening feels slow, your speaking or understanding might be improving in ways you don't see immediately. Patience means trusting that all these parts are growing together, even if at different speeds. One of the best ways to stay patient is to set realistic goals. Instead of expecting to understand every native speaker perfectly in a week or two, aim for small, achievable steps. Maybe today your goal is to listen to 5 minutes of a podcast without subtitles and try to get the main idea. Tomorrow, you might practice repeating a few phrases. These small goals add up and help you stay motivated. I also want to highlight the power of repetition. Listening to the same audio or video multiple times is a secret weapon. The first time might feel confusing, but by the third or fourth time, you'll catch new details. Your brain starts predicting what comes next and fills in gaps. This repetition builds your confidence and makes the language feel more natural. It's important to understand that patience doesn't mean waiting passively. It means active patience. Keep practicing regularly, keep exposing yourself to English in different ways, and keep challenging yourself gently. Use materials you enjoy so that learning feels fun, not a chore. When you enjoy the process, patience comes easier. Sometimes when progress feels slow, it can help to talk about your experiences with others who are learning English too. Sharing your challenges and successes with a community can make you feel less alone and more supported. At the English Talk community, we're here to encourage each other. Remember, you are part of a group of learners who understand what you're going through, and that connection is powerful. Finally, I want you to keep this thought close. Learning to understand native speakers who talk fast is a skill that takes time to develop. It's not magic, and it's not about being perfect. It's about persistence and patience. Your brain is amazing and is constantly working even when you don't notice. The progress you want is coming, step by step, in silence, as you keep listening and practicing. So, whenever you feel like you're stuck or not moving forward, remind yourself to be patient and kind to yourself. Trust the journey, keep practicing regularly, and remember that every moment you spend listening to English is helping your brain grow stronger. You're building a foundation that will support your understanding of fast, natural English, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. That foundation will lead you to success over time. Keep going. You're doing great. I want to take a moment now to encourage you, because if you've listened this far, it means you are committed to improving your English listening skills. That commitment alone is a huge step forward. I know understanding fast English feels challenging, even overwhelming at times, but I want you to remember this. It is absolutely possible. You can get there, and you are already on the right path by being here with me, learning, practicing, and opening yourself up to new strategies. Sometimes the journey feels slow, and you might wonder if it's worth it, but every bit of effort you put in builds your ability, even when you don't immediately see it. Think about what you've learned today. Maybe it was the idea of listening in chunks instead of word by word, or how important it is to be patient with yourself and your progress. Maybe you connected with one of the stories of learners who struggled but kept going and eventually succeeded. Ask yourself, what can I apply right now in this moment to my own learning? Could I try listening to a short video or podcast and focus on the rhythm instead of trying to catch every word? Could I practice shadowing a sentence to feel the flow of the language? Could I simply remind myself to be gentle and patient when things feel difficult? Applying even one small idea can make a difference. Learning a language isn't about perfection, it's about progress and persistence. You are already growing, even if it doesn't feel like it every day. Trust yourself, trust the process, and keep showing up for your learning. Your future self will thank you for the effort you're putting in now. If today's tips have helped you or inspired you in any way, I want to invite you to share this episode with a friend who's also learning English. When you share, you're helping others who face the same challenges, and you're building a community of learners supporting each other. That connection is powerful. It makes learning less lonely and more motivating. Also, don't forget to follow the podcast so you never miss the next step in your English journey. There's so much more to explore and practice, and I'm here with you every step of the way. We're growing together as a community, helping each other understand English more naturally and confidently. Remember, every time you listen, you're strengthening your ability to catch the meaning behind fast English. Keep practicing, stay patient, and celebrate your progress no matter how small. You're doing amazing, and I'm proud of you for being here, taking these important steps. So take a deep breath, keep your curiosity alive, and keep moving forward. You have what it takes to understand fast English, and I can't wait to see how far you'll go.